On the war-torn planet Zolara, where the skies bled red with the dusk of a dying star, the remote and lawless city of Draxon thrived on the trade of exotic creatures. In a dark corner of its bustling market district, a young Orion girl named Lyra was displayed in a decrepit cage, more beast than child in the eyes of her captors. Her delicate features were marred by the harsh conditions of her captivity, and her once vibrant eyes had dimmed to a dull sheen under the relentless gaze of the Vark traders. The Varks, known throughout the galaxy for their cruelty and greed, had taken Lyra from her home during one of their many raids. They saw her telepathic abilities not as a gift, but as a commodity to be exploited for entertainment. Daily, they paraded her before crowds, showcasing her powers in cruel games and forcing her to communicate simple, often humiliating messages to entertain onlookers. Despite her situation, Lyra retained a spark of defiance. She learned quickly to hide the true extent of her abilities, sharing only enough to satisfy the incessant demands of her captors while silently nursing a growing reservoir of strength and hatred for them. It was during one of these public displays that Jake, a human mercenary who had come to Draxon seeking supplies, first saw Lyra. He was no stranger to the darker sides of the galaxy, having witnessed more than his fair share of injustices. However, something about Lyra's silent resilience struck a chord within him. He saw not just a victim, but a kindred spirit, a fellow prisoner of circumstance, albeit in a far more literal sense. Jake spent the next few days observing the market from a distance, planning under the guise of a regular customer. He noted the changing of the guards, the lulls in foot traffic, and the few blind spots in the market security. His plan took shape. A daring rescue under the cover of night, leveraging his skills in stealth and combat honed over years of mercenary work. The night of the rescue, the sky roared with thunder, and heavy rain masked the sounds of Jake's careful movements. He approached Lyra's cage with a lockpick hidden in his palm, the small metal tool feeling almost insignificant against the enormity of what he was about to do. As he worked the lock, Lyra watched him with a mixture of fear and hope, her mind buzzing with the possibilities of freedom and the fear of disappointment. With a soft click, the lock gave way, and the cage door swung open. Jake extended his hand, a silent offer of trust and solidarity. Lyra hesitated for a mere moment before placing her small, cold hand in his. They communicated not with words, but with a shared understanding of what needed to be done. The escape through Draxon's dark, rain-slicked streets was a blur of shadow and adrenaline. They dodged patrols and avoided the searching beams of security drones, slipping through alleys and over fences with the desperation of those who have everything to gain and nothing left to lose. Jake led the way, but Lyra was quick on her feet, her senses heightened by the thrill of escape and the terror of potential recapture. As they reached the outskirts of the city, Jake steered them towards an old, abandoned warehouse he had scoped out earlier. Inside, hidden beneath a tarp, was an old hovercraft he had procured for their escape. It was battered and worn, but it was their only chance to get out of Draxon and start the long journey towards something resembling freedom. As the hovercraft lifted off the ground, leaving the confines of the city behind, Lyra felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Beside her, Jake kept his eyes on the horizon, knowing the hardest part of their journey was yet to come. But for the first time in a long time, Lyra allowed herself to hope, to dream of a life unchained and a destiny reclaimed, all thanks to the kind human who had dared to free her. The hovercraft buzzed low over the dark landscape of Zolara, its old engine struggling against the gusting winds and driving rain. Jake kept a steady hand on the controls, navigating through the rocky terrain that led to the lesser-known trade routes out of Draxon. Lyra sat beside him, her senses alive with the myriad new sensations of flight and freedom, yet her mind was tense, knowing they were not yet safe. As they sped away from the city, the lights of Draxon faded into the night like distant stars, swallowed by the vast darkness of the wilderness. Lyra's heart pounded with a mixture of exhilaration and fear. Each bump and dip of the hovercraft felt like a leap between worlds, from captive to fugitive, from object to person. Jake noticed Lyra's discomfort and tried to reassure her with a brief smile. "We'll be clear the city limits soon," he said, his voice barely audible over the roar of the storm and the engines. "Once we hit the ravine of shadows, we can follow it north to the rebel base. They'll help us." Lyra nodded, absorbing his words. Her mind, still alert to any trace of pursuit, reached out instinctively, touching the edges of consciousness around them. She sensed confusion and anger back in Draxon, her captors scrambling in the aftermath of her escape. She focused, trying to blur their thoughts further, casting ripples of disorientation through the psychic ether that connected her to them. The sudden blare of an alarm snapped them both to attention. A Vark drone, a sleek and lethal hunter, had picked up their trail. "Hold on!" Jake shouted, as he pushed the hovercraft into a steep dive into the ravine of shadows. The ravine walls loomed, jagged and menacing, as they descended into its depths. Navigating the ravine was treacherous. The narrow walls and sharp turns required precise maneuvers. Jake's skills were put to the test as he dodged outcroppings and avoided the increasingly violent gusts of wind. Lyra, her nerves stretched thin, used her abilities to mask their path, casting psychic veils that muddled the drone's sensors. They emerged from the ravine as dawn began to break, the first light casting long shadows over the landscape. The drone was still behind them, but struggling to keep up with the intricate path they had taken. With a final surge of speed, Jake directed the hovercraft toward a dense forest known as the Whispering Woods. The thick foliage could help mask their presence and give them a chance to regroup. As they entered the forest, the natural canopy enveloped them, dampening the sound of the engines and cloaking them in shadow. Jake brought the hovercraft to a gentle stop in a small clearing. They were deep in the woods, hidden from immediate pursuit. "Let's take a moment here," Jake suggested, turning off the engines to conserve fuel. "We can check the craft for any damage and plan our next move." Lyra stepped out of the hovercraft, her feet touching the soft, mossy ground. The earthy smell of the forest was a stark contrast to the sterile confinement of her cage. She breathed deeply, feeling a connection to the planet that had been denied to her for so long. While Jake inspected the hovercraft, Lyra walked to the edge of the clearing, her senses stretched out once more, feeling for signs of pursuit. The mental echoes were distant now, confused and scattered. They had bought some time, but she knew it wouldn't be long before the Vark organized a more concerted effort to recapture her. Returning to Jake, who was now wiping grease from his hands, she relayed what she sensed. "They're still searching, but they don't know where we are. For now." Jake nodded, looking back towards the way they had come. "We'll head to the rebel base at first light. They have medics, engineers, and more importantly, they have a plan. We need to be a part of that if we're going to get you truly free." As night turned to morning, Jake and Lyra prepared to continue their journey. Together, they set out deeper into the Whispering Woods, towards hope, towards rebellion, and towards a new dawn that promised not just survival, but a fight for a future where no one would be chained again. The journey to the rebel base was fraught with hazards, both natural and manufactured by the desperate clutches of the Vark. As Jake and Lyra traveled deeper into the Whispering Woods, the foliage grew thicker, the paths more tangled. Jake maneuvered the hovercraft with a seasoned hand, his eyes scanning for hidden dangers. Lyra, meanwhile, kept her senses attuned to the psychic landscape, her abilities a crucial shield against the ever-present threat of discovery. By midday, they reached the outskirts of what seemed like an impenetrable thicket, a natural barrier no ordinary vehicle could pass. Jake brought the hovercraft to a stop, turning to Lyra with a nod. "We walk from here," he said, his voice low. They covered the hovercraft with branches and leaves, camouflaging it within the dense underbrush, and set off on foot. The forest around them was alive with the sounds of distant creatures and the subtle rustle of leaves in the wind. Lyra followed Jake through a narrow, barely visible path, her mind alert to any sign of danger. After what felt like hours, they came upon a cleverly concealed entrance marked by a series of natural stones arranged in a specific pattern, a signal to those who knew what to look for. Jake tapped a sequence on one of the stones, and a section of the forest floor shifted, revealing a hidden elevator platform. They stepped onto it, descending into the heart of the rebel stronghold. The underground base was a hive of activity, with members of various species moving about, their expressions set in determination and purpose. The leader of the resistance, a towering figure named Soren, greeted them as they emerged. His species, the Calrexians, were known for their strategic minds and formidable presence. "Welcome, Lyra," Soren's voice boomed, his eyes kind yet piercing. "And thank you, Jake, for bringing her to us. We've heard much about your plight, young Orion." Lyra, slightly overwhelmed, nodded in acknowledgement. "Thank you for sheltering us," she replied, her voice steady despite her nerves. Soren guided them through the base, showing them the various sections dedicated to planning, weapon development, and training. "Your abilities could turn the tide for us," Soren explained to Lyra, "but only if you're willing to learn and control them to their fullest extent." Lyra agreed without hesitation. Over the following weeks, she underwent intensive training, honing her telepathic skills under the guidance of the Resistance's best instructors. She learned not only to shield thoughts, but to project them powerfully enough to incapacitate enemies or to cloak their operations from remote detection. Meanwhile, Jake integrated himself into the tactical team, where his experience as a mercenary provided valuable insights into the Vark's military strategies. Together with the rebel strategists, he helped plan raids on Vark supply lines, drawing on his knowledge of their operations to target critical points that would cripple their logistical capabilities. One such mission involved a stealth attack on a Vark ammunition depot located near a critical junction point for their supply routes. Lyra played a crucial role, using her enhanced abilities to create a psychic diversion that left the guards disoriented and confused, allowing the rebel forces to seize the depot with minimal resistance. The success of the raid boosted the morale of the resistance, spreading a renewed vigor throughout the ranks. Stories of the mysterious Orion girl who could bend minds began to circulate, becoming part legend, part propaganda, inspiring hope and fear in equal measure. As Lyra grew in her powers and confidence, so did her role in the resistance. She became not just a participant in their operations, but a symbol of their cause, a beacon of the potential for every oppressed being in the galaxy to fight back against their subjugators. One evening, as they planned their next major offensive, Soren looked around at his team, his gaze lingering on Lyra and Jake. "This next move will be our boldest yet," he declared. "It's not just about hitting them where it hurts. It's about showing the galaxy that no force can hold down the will of the free. And we will be free." Lyra, sitting beside Jake, felt a surge of determination. Together, they had already changed so much, freed from her cage and now fighting for the freedom of others. The thought strengthened her resolve. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them head-on, no longer a captive, but a warrior of the resistance. The rebel base buzzed with intense activity as preparations for the upcoming offensive reached a fever pitch. Maps were studied under low light, and plans were whispered in hushed tones throughout the warren of tunnels that made up the Resistance's headquarters. Jake and Lyra were at the heart of it all, deeply involved in the strategy sessions and training exercises that filled their days and nights. The target was the Vark's planetary command hub, a heavily fortified compound located in the industrial heartland of Zolara. It was the nerve center for all Vark operations on the planet and beyond, a daunting fortress bristling with defenses and guarded by elite troops. For the Resistance, it represented the ultimate prize. Disrupt it, and the entire Vark presence in the sector could be destabilized. Lyra's role was crucial. She had developed her abilities to the point where she could not only mask the psychic signatures of a small team, but also create illusions potent enough to mislead the Vark's sensory technologies. The plan required precision, stealth, and a fair measure of luck. The night before the mission, Soren gathered his strike team in the main briefing room. The atmosphere was tense. Everyone understood the stakes. "Tonight, we strike a blow that will echo through the stars," Soren declared, his voice resonant in the cramped space. "Not just for us, but for every being who has suffered under the yoke of oppression. We fight for freedom, our freedom and that of future generations." As they geared up, Jake pulled Lyra aside. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" he asked, his concern evident. Lyra nodded, her face set with determination. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," she responded, her voice steady. "We've got a chance to make a real difference, Jake, and I'm not going to let it slip away." The team set out under the cover of darkness, using a network of underground tunnels to approach the Vark compound undetected. Emerging from the tunnels a safe distance from their target, Lyra took a deep breath and extended her senses, casting a wide psychic net to shield their approach. As they neared the outer defenses, the effectiveness of Lyra's training became evident. They slipped past sensors and dodged patrols, all seemingly oblivious to their presence. Reaching the outer wall of the compound, the team used a series of explosive charges to create a breach, timing them with the thunderous noise of a passing storm to mask the sound. Once inside, chaos reigned. Lyra intensified her efforts, projecting confusing psychic signals to disorient the Vark troops. Jake and the others moved with lethal efficiency, neutralizing resistance as they made their way to the central control room. The battle for the control room was fierce. Vark soldiers, trained for such contingencies, fought back hard, but the rebels were driven by a cause greater than themselves, pushing forward with every ounce of their strength. Lyra found herself face-to-face with the Vark commander, a hulking brute who seemed immune to her psychic manipulations. In a moment of desperation, she reached deeper into her powers than ever before, tapping into the raw emotion and pain of her years in captivity. With a piercing scream, she unleashed a wave of psychic energy that overwhelmed the commander, leaving him stunned and disoriented. Seizing the moment, the rebels took control of the room, securing the hub and disabling the Vark communications network. The victory was more than tactical. It was symbolic, a sign that the Vark were not invincible. As the rebels began to transmit images of their victory across the galaxy, a wave of uprisings flared on other oppressed worlds. Lyra, exhausted but exhilarated, stood beside Jake as they watched the transmissions go out. "We've done it," Jake said, putting an arm around her shoulders. "We've really done it." Lyra smiled, her eyes bright with tears of joy and relief. "Yes, we have, but this is just the beginning, Jake. Now, we help others do the same." The victory at the Vark Command Hub marked a turning point in the war for Zolara. It was a testament to the courage and resilience of those who refused to be broken, led by a young Orion girl whose spirit proved unchainable. The fight for freedom was far from over, but now there was hope that spread like wildfire across the stars. The victory at the Vark Command Hub set off a chain reaction across the galaxy. News of the stunning defeat inflicted by the Resistance spread rapidly, igniting hopes and rebellions on dozens of worlds. In the aftermath, Lyra and Jake found themselves at the forefront of a movement that was reshaping the political landscape of the galaxy. As leaders of the newly liberated Zolara, they faced the daunting task of rebuilding a society that had been under the thumb of the Vark for decades. The destruction left by years of occupation and warfare had taken a significant toll on the planet's infrastructure and its people's spirits. But with the command hub now serving as their headquarters, they began the work of reconstruction and reconciliation. Lyra took on the role of an emissary, using her unique abilities and experiences to forge alliances with other liberated planets. Her story, once a tale of suffering and exploitation, became a beacon of resilience and hope. She traveled extensively, advocating for unity and support among the newly free societies, helping to lay the groundwork for what would become the United Galactic Council. Meanwhile, Jake focused on the defense and security of Zolara. He worked tirelessly to train a new planetary defense force, drawing volunteers from all over the planet who were eager to protect their newfound freedom. Under his guidance, These forces learned not just the tactics of warfare, but the principles of justice and integrity that Jake and Lyra had fought so hard to uphold. Together, they also tackled the challenge of integrating the various alien species that had been brought to Zalara as part of the Vark slave trade. These individuals, once enemies or mere chattel, were now part of the burgeoning society, each bringing their own cultures and experiences into the melting pot that Zalara was becoming. This integration was not without its difficulties, as prejudices and grievances had to be addressed openly and with a spirit of forgiveness and understanding. Amidst these challenges, the construction of the United Galactic Council's headquarters began. Designed as a symbol of the galaxy's unity and diversity, the building was located on Zalara's highest plateau, overlooking the capital. Its architecture was a blend of many worlds, reflecting the collective heritage and future aspirations of its member planets. As the inauguration day of the Council approached, representatives from across the galaxy arrived, each delegation a testament to the changes that had swept through their realms. The ceremony was broadcast throughout the galaxy, a public declaration of their shared commitment to peace and mutual prosperity. Lyra stood at the podium, her eyes sweeping over the crowd of diverse beings gathered before her. Her speech was heartfelt, recounting the journey from darkness to light that they all had shared. Today, we stand together not just as survivors, but as architects of our future, she declared. This council is our promise to each other, that never again will we allow tyranny to divide us. Together, we will face whatever challenges may come, supporting each other in peace as we did in struggle. The crowd erupted in applause, a sound that carried with it the weight of countless hopes and dreams. As the leaders signed the charter of the council, Lyra felt a profound sense of accomplishment and a renewed sense of purpose. The fight for freedom had ended, but the work of maintaining that freedom and helping others achieve it was just beginning. That night, as the stars shone brightly over the illuminated council building, Lyra and Jake stood side by side, looking out over the landscape that had once been marred by war but now symbolized hope. They spoke of the past, of the friends lost and the battles fought, and they planned for the future, one that they would build together with all those who had joined their cause. In the peaceful quiet of the evening, with the galaxy watching, it was clear that a new dawn had broken, not just for Zalara, but for all the free peoples of the universe. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but for the first time in many generations, the stars seemed within their reach. Years after the formation of the United Galactic Council, the galaxy enjoyed a peace and prosperity that had once seemed impossible. Planets that had been battlegrounds were now places of collaboration, where former enemies worked together to heal the scars of long wars. At the heart of this transformation was the Council, which had grown to include hundreds of member worlds, each committed to the principles of mutual respect and collective security. Lyra, now regarded as one of the founding figures of the new era, continued to serve as an ambassador and a symbol of hope. Her personal story had inspired countless others to believe in the possibility of change, and she was often called upon to mediate disputes and guide new members in the ways of the Council. As the anniversary of the Council's founding approached, a grand celebration was planned. Leaders from across the galaxy would gather on Zalara to commemorate their achievements and renew their commitments to the Council's ideals. For Lyra, the event was a poignant reminder of her journey from captive to leader and of all those who had supported her along the way. The celebration took place at the Council's headquarters, now a historic site surrounded by gardens that commemorated heroes from the Revolution. Statues and memorials dotted the landscape, each telling a story of sacrifice and redemption. Among them was a statue of Jake, who had passed away some years earlier, remembered as a hero who had played a crucial role in the liberation of Zalara and the formation of the Council. As the delegates gathered, Lyra took the stage, her presence commanding and serene. The crowd fell silent, eager to hear from the woman whose voice had guided so many through times of darkness. Friends, allies, fellow citizens of the galaxy, Lyra began, her voice clear and strong. Today, we celebrate not just the passing of years, but the enduring strength of our unity. Each of us comes from a different world, a different culture, yet we have found common ground in our desire for peace and justice. She spoke of the challenges they had faced, the battles they had fought both on the battlefields and in the halls of governance. She reminded them of the Council's mission to prevent the horrors of the past from ever recurring, and of their responsibility to act not just for themselves, but for the generations to come. As we stand here today, let's remember those who are not with us, whose sacrifices made this day possible. Let us honor their memory by continuing their work, by standing firm in our commitment to protect and nurture the fragile peace we have built. After her speech, a series of cultural presentations from various worlds began, showcasing the diversity and richness of the Galactic community. Music, dance, and art filled the air, a vibrant celebration of life and freedom. The event concluded with the unveiling of a new memorial, dedicated to all those who had lost their lives in the struggle for freedom. Lyra laid the first wreath, her eyes filled with tears of sorrow and gratitude. The crowd joined in a moment of silence, a powerful, shared recognition of their collective past and shared future. As night fell, fireworks lit up the sky, their brilliant colors reflecting in the eyes of the attendees. Lyra watched from the balcony of the council building, her heart full. The galaxy was still imperfect, challenges remained, and not all wounds had healed. But there was hope, a hope built on the foundation of hard-won freedom and the unbreakable spirit of those who valued it. In the quiet that followed the celebration, Lyra felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The road she had traveled was long and fraught with hardship, but it had led to a place of great meaning. Her legacy, and that of all those who had fought alongside her, would live on in the continuing work of the Council, in the ongoing pursuit of a galaxy where freedom and dignity were guaranteed for all. This was a legacy of the freed, a legacy not of conquest or dominion, but of liberation and lasting peace. And as the stars shone down on Zolara, they seemed to whisper of a future still unwritten, full of potential and promise, waiting to be shaped by the hands of those who now lived free under their light.